Yo, Ryan Hart here. Welcome to the Always Better Than Yesterday podcast channel. These are the interview sessions where I put my curious questions to inspiring people with one goal in mind, to help you be better than you were yesterday in your heart and in your mind. While you're here spending time with us, I'd love it if you subscribed, leave a like, or maybe drop a comment below with letting us know some of your thoughts on the interview. Please do share it with someone that you'd love to help be better too. Iroro, welcome to the Always Better Than Yesterday podcast. Good to have you here, my friend. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thanks for having me. It's a real pleasure and honor to be on your show.
You and I have a good heart for leadership, and I'm sure we'll get to that point eventually, but I'd love to know kind of a little bit more about you, a little bit more about your background and your story, if you would care to share a bit more about you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I'm one of eight from a very big family, the last child actually. So I was always around people older than me and seeing things being done ahead of me in a sense. Grew up in Nigeria, so that's my parents are Nigerian. So lived the first 15, 16 years in Nigeria and then relocated when my dad passed away. But I think one of my very first introduction to leadership is just seeing how my parents, handled and managed the home. My dad was into politics and then he ran his own business, and he would often, back then I don't think I appreciated it as much, but now I definitely do appreciate what he was trying to teach, not just myself, but my other brothers as well and sisters. He would take us out to work with him and get us to do different jobs, whether it's pay his staff or just help monitor or supervise. So for me, without actually knowing, that was an early introduction to leadership. And then around the house as well, we had people who would come in and help, whether it's repairs or people who would help clean. But then my parents would get us to do the work with them. And for us, we couldn't understand, like, well, mom and dad, you're paying someone to do the job. Why should I have to do it? I thought the whole point of paying someone is to give me some free time. But they would get us to do it. And that, again, was just another great introduction to leading from the front. Whether you've got people working with you, alongside you, or for you, just doing the job or work alongside them. So yes, for me, that was kind of my early introduction, I'll say, to leadership, being around my brothers, then obviously then working and, getting jobs and trying to figure out things myself. Started to just learn more. And I think the turning point for me was 5 years ago when I was volunteering at the church, and I was asked to be the youth director. And for me, I think that really peaked in terms of my interest for leadership, because now here I am, still, in my opinion, inexperienced, but asked to lead a group of people. And I'm thinking, okay, I've been working beforehand and leading in different capacities, but now these are young people they're kind of looking to you and expecting you to lead them in a certain way. So I really wanted to learn more and develop, because A, I wanted to lead myself well, and two, I wanted to really do right by them. So, and the journey just really kicked off, and I started diving into books, podcasts, and just wherever I could find or material, speak to people, ask questions. So yeah, and that's how I found you again, and just looking for good content and good material to keep learning, because I feel I'm still on that journey. And then I came across you. I'm like, oh wow, okay, this is, I definitely want to listen to this, and I could learn and grow from this. So that's my journey so far.
I love that. And NHS as well, your career in the NHS.
Yeah. Yes.
How's that been over the last 10 months?
Oh wow, it's been interesting. I know obviously for everyone, I'm sure for the police, I know with your background again, with the police and people in the supermarkets and just everywhere, I think I'm learning to appreciate more just the service everyone's doing. But in my particular context as a medical professional working with the teams there, and just the sacrifices that they're having to make. It's amazing to see. I've always valued the NHS, and what we have here in the UK compared to, like, say, in America, where you have to pay, by and large, for healthcare. Even in Nigeria as well, it's a similar system where you get the best healthcare if you've got money. Here it's a bit different. It's a level playing field that's as much as possible for everyone. So I've always valued that. So and the staff are amazing. they're working really hard. So hats off to all the guys there. They're doing a harder job than I am, that's for sure.
I really love the word and sense of legacy, and I get a sense that there's a bit of legacy around you and your leadership with your father, and also the legacy that you're going to leave for your youth directing. Like, what does the word legacy mean to you?
It's really important. I think for me, it's really what people get out of it's my I like to think of my life as, or the value or my purpose and what I bring to anything is not is it's more than just what I have. It's I went through a phase of me, very, selfish, self-centered, and then growing to a point where I'm now thinking of what can I contribute? How can I what can I give back? My parents would and I think you definitely picked up on the fact that a lot of my training and the foundation is really from my parents. I'll tell you a quick story. My mom, and I think this would really sum up my idea in terms of legacy and how I see that particular question. My mom one day was on her way to an evening gathering. This is back in Nigeria, still very young, and we knew the meeting will start at a certain time and last for half an hour. And she heads off, and we knew, okay, well, she'll probably be back maybe 7 in the evening, 7:30. But then in less than 15 minutes, she was coming back. So we were a bit weird, surprised, because we're like, that's a bit weird. How come she's coming back so soon? Lo and behold, there's a family behind her, right, of 5 or 6. And we're like, wow, okay, what's going on? And apparently, as she was going, their house they were living in was on fire. And they managed to rescue as much as they could. And they were just out on the streets. And I'm from a family, from 8, there's 8 of us, right, already in the house. And my mom's coming back with a family of 5 or 6 people. And she says to my dad, look, obviously, I don't know these guys, but, they're just out on the street. Let's make room for them in the house. I'm thinking, well, there's no room. My mom's like, no, there's room for everyone. And, they ended up staying with us for 2 to 3 years. And they became from strangers to family. And the parents went on to get very great jobs. But today, the boy and the girl, the boys and the girls from that family they're like family to me. So it's and every time we would reminisce and stuff, we're looking and speaking on just what that was, that moment that my mom did something to strangers and how that changed the trajectory of their life, because now they were in a house rent free. They were eating rent, without having to pay. And even they offered to contribute, my parents said no. So that gave them a platform to be able to save up and then move up, and now being able to help other people. So for me, when I think of legacy, I'm always thinking of how best can I contribute that would go way beyond me, that it would reach people that I couldn't reach. So now these family are reaching people that I don't care, or I don't know, or I've never seen, in a sense. But then what we did in that moment has had an impact. So for me, that's how I think of legacy, is not so much what someone would say about me, but the impact my influence on someone would have on people I would never, ever see on me. And that for me is what drives me in how I conduct myself or think of leadership or helping or serving people. Because ultimately, I think leadership is service. I'm called to serve. I'm called to equip. I'm called to empower and leverage whatever resources I have to empower other people. And in the process, I get blessed as well. I get replenished. I get a sense of fulfillment. So it's a win-win for everyone. That's how I see it.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that story. And where do you take your inspiration for leadership development?
Okay, so without getting religious,
yeah, go.
my
I'm
biggest inspiration is really from the Bible. It's from the Bible. that's my biggest inspiration. I think I read through the text and just see different models of good leadership and very bad leadership. So for me, that's kind of where I take my the inspiration from. But then coming into my current context is seeing how people do things, seeing how you do things, seeing how you communicate with people, see how, you know, people around me, my directors and my family, even in my home, my children. I'm starting to teach my children at an early age about leadership. I've got two boys, an 11-year-old and an 8-year-old, and I'm talking to them about leadership and from a vantage point of serving. You know, don't think one of my boys plays football, and he, you know, when he's got captain's armband, you know, shouting out instructions. I'm like, okay, I understand what you're doing, but think of it. Try to equip your team, try and encourage your team to do better. Don't think now because you've got the captain armband, you have to, you know, tell everyone what to do and how to do everything. I mean, you've all practiced together, so they know what to do. Just encourage them or remind them. So it's from everywhere, but definitely the primary source is the Bible for me. And then just again watching. I'm learning to watch, even from bad leadership. I've been under some terrible leadership, and even from that I learned. Like,
Always.
Wow, I'm like, I definitely do not want to be that.
and that's useful. And I think, you know, I have many conversations with people that are suffering. There's something that's suffering their heart and their mind and their soul in their workplace. And I'm like, nothing's wasted. It's all, and it all informs probably your own value set. And it's a call to the leadership within you. And yeah, I'm with you. And, you know, I think the good book says the greatest among you will be the servant of all. And
Absolutely.
how do you equip the next generation with that heart set and mindset?
I think repeat messaging is very important. I think because sometimes I think the young people get they get a bad rap. I think sometimes because, you know, there's that stereotype. They're very selfish. They're very, you know, it's all about them, and they're just into Instagram and social media and all of that. And on the one hand, that's true that they, you know, but on the other hand, what I've definitely learned from being around so many young adults and young people is that, and even though I'm not that much older than them, I find that from just how I was brought up and just my culture, and we're taught to just listen and not speak unless we're spoken to, you know, the sort of things, and but even when we feel a certain way, not respond or not really verbalize that. The younger generation now, I find, are quick to verbalize how they feel, and for me, I think there's value there. One of the challenges, obviously, that initially in my early years of leadership, especially working with the young guys, is to think that they were rude or very opinionated when they had little or no experience. But I'm learning to see that as actually there's value in the difference that they bring. I may not necessarily agree with their approach, but the fact that they feel confident to be able to speak up and voice how they feel, I think it's good. If we're going to build a team that will be successful and achieve great things, then we really need everyone being able to speak up without being afraid of what the repercussions might be for speaking up, which in my generation, I know we definitely had that mindset. So for me, it's helping them say, well, look, you can verbalize how you feel, but there is perhaps a manner in which to do that, and just repeat messaging on what leadership is all about. Because I think for even some adults as well who are not really intentional in the subject area of leadership, they see leadership as a position, a title, something to get to. So for me now is trying to change that narrative and say leadership is everything. Leadership is from where you are. Leadership is leading yourself. You know, if you're at college or school, is how you prioritizing your work, how are you getting things done, what do you want out of your life, how are you helping those around you. So leadership is where we keep growing and we keep learning leadership. So it's just that repeat messaging and helping them, and I think this applies to adults as well, helping us just see leadership as not a title or position, but function. It's a
Mm,
it's a call to service. It's what we do. So that, for me, that's how I found it works. And just having these open conversations and helping people see, like, look, it's part of our everyday life. Waking up this morning and deciding I'm going to brush my teeth and then I'm going to jump on this call with you. There's an element of leadership there, because I could have been, oh, well, I'm not just going to, rock up however, or not show up, or whatever it is. So I think it's the decisions that we make on a daily. That's a good way to put it. It's helping them feel that, or realize that it's the everyday decisions. That's what leadership is. It's because those everyday moments, those little decisions we think are just little decisions, compound to something in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20 years. So that's how at best I think I could help the young people around me see leadership and be more interested in it.
Yeah, I love that. I think there's something that you talk about, safety, to have those conversations. And sometimes, where there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of fear out in the world at the moment, whether that be the media, in our communities. And the one thing that fear does is it gets us to focus on self. And I think the one thing that leadership does is it gets us to posture ourselves on others. And how have you found the last sort of 12 months really with that fear? How have you been a light in the darkness?
That is a great question. That is a very great question. I think, yeah, you're right. Fear definitely gets us to go into self-preservation mode. For me, the past 12 months has really been eye-opening for me. I think initially when the pandemic hit, we were all talking about just, the death rates. And that was significant because every number is a real person at the end of it, and there's real families hurting. But I think the other side, that people perhaps were not seen as much, or wasn't getting as much airplay in the media, was the impact in terms of mental health. Being again in the health service, and just with my work with the charity, we were seeing that firsthand, and just the mental health repercussions or implications of the lockdown, the first lockdown, the second lockdown, and now we're in lockdown 3.0. So I think I went from a initial point of being afraid of getting the virus myself, and then you get afraid of, okay, you're hearing things in the media in terms of the disproportionate number of Afro-Caribbean people dying to the virus, and then you think, oh, okay, could that be me? Could that be my family? And then you get to the point where you either stay at home and not do anything and live in fear and terrified and petrified and all of that, and in despair, or you take another direction and say, well, okay, well, this is happening, that it's real. How best do I keep myself safe but still be a light to others? Because if I'm feeling this way, I believe that my faith helps me in my everyday life. So if me being a person of faith, I'm feeling this sort of fear and anxiety, in my mind, I'm thinking, so how about my neighbor who perhaps has no faith or has no hope? How are they feeling? And perhaps they're feeling it better than I am, but in that moment, I don't know. The only way I could find out how they're feeling and whether I could be of help is if I reach out to them. And that means stepping out of my fear, thinking, not thinking less of myself, but thinking of myself less in that moment. So I had to make that conscious decision. My wife and we had to, my children, we all spoke and said, well, look, this is the reality. It is happening, and so we need to be mindful. However, how can we be a light in our community? So we decided one day just to go out to the neighborhood and just knock on doors and ask the neighbors, how are you doing? Do you need us to get you anything? Can we buy you? We're going to the shops. Do you need, a pack of eggs or bread? So there are a few neighbors who we knew were elderly. So we went to their doors and we're always checking in on them and just asking. One of our neighbors was isolating or shielding. Was shielding, and I'd always say, oh, do you need bread? Do you need milk? And then occasionally they'd be like, yes, can you get me milk? Or can you get me eggs? So that was good. And it was amazing how the fear lifted from looking outward. I felt almost, it was a sense of freedom, like I've been liberated. I feel like, okay, well, actually, I could do something. I could do something in my community outside of what I was doing at work, which is important for from a healthcare point of view, but just locally, and I could reach someone and I could impact someone. So I think the best way for me to deal with fear, and hopefully this will be beneficial to people listening, is to really step out of yourself, because when we're afraid, we're always looking in, and sometimes just be intentional and just do it, because I don't think fear is handy. There's a healthy fear. So I don't want to catch the virus, so that sense of, me taking precaution and being wise, washing my hands, wearing the mask, it's good. I don't want to break my leg. So guess what I don't do? I'm not going to step out in front of a moving vehicle. That's a healthy fear to have, right? But then the fear that now gets me paralyzed, the sort of fear that means I can't do anything, that's not healthy, because it affects everything. It affects the fear that, what's going to happen to my kids, then makes me not appreciate them how they are now. And just, the fear that, would my child succeed at this, makes me not appreciate the gift he actually has, and then it could cause me to compare him with someone else. The fear that is, am I going to be a good enough husband, compared to someone who could make me not work at my own skills to satisfy my wife and ask, okay, how best can I please you? How best can I, serve you? So I think, so there's always going to be fear, but I think it's doing things in spite of it. It's taking that first action, or that step, saying, look, I'm afraid. Yes, be wise, take whatever precautions we have to. But for me, I think it's just stepping out and doing it. That's the only way I know, or I've found in my personal experience, to be effective, even at work, coming down to, the pressures at work, is being afraid of, are we going to be able to achieve certain things? So I moved jobs recently, but in my previous employment, we had to achieve it was a significant project. In 3-4 days, we had to install a number of analyzers, change systems. And I remember going into this meeting, and the project manager, the head of IT, said to me and my team, it's not happening. It's just too big a project, too short a time. It's not happening. And in the labs, we needed these equipment, we needed these systems. And we're thinking, oh God, they're talking about months now. And I'm like, we can do this. I was afraid that I'm trying to persuade the team to go along with my plan. What if it goes wrong? That's me. That's what Iroro said to do it. That's what. So I was afraid of that. But then I was thinking, okay, what if it goes right? What would be the impact? How much better would this be for our patients in terms of our turnaround times, for the staffing, because we now have more capacity and they're not having to work hard, even harder than they currently are doing now. And we made a decision. I was able to convince the team, and thankfully they backed me up, and we went ahead with it, and it happened. There were some glitches here and there, but we were able to do it. So again, you never know what's on the other side of fear until you actually step in, or at least make a journey towards that.
It reminds me of a piece of scripture that says, blessed be those who believe without seeing. More blessed be those who believe without seeing. And in that moment, like, that act of leadership was just simply believing it was possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And believing in the team. I think it's very important. I think this past 12 months has definitely, again, taught me the value of team. Brian, there is no way at work, some of the things we're able to achieve, we would have achieved without the team. Absolutely no way. Absolutely no way. I think you're as good as your team, personally. And that for me is a sign of a great leader, because you can't buy a team off a shelf. You can't pick the best of the best and say, okay, well, now this is, you have to work with what you have. You can't, go into a place and say, well, I don't like all of these people, so I'm sacking everyone.
This is exactly what Mourinho's finding out at Tottenham, isn't he? He's had the luxuries over his career of doing that, and
absolutely. So, but I think the sign of a good leader is being able to work with who you have. Yes, sometimes things will need to change. and I appreciate and recognize that. But then building a team that can do, because together we can do more, we can reach more, we can achieve more. So the team and the things we've been able to achieve, whether at work professionally or even in my home as a family, it would not have been possible without the team. So I think this past 12 months has definitely taught me the value of a team and appreciating the team. Just saying thank you. Thank you for the hard work you did. Thank you for we couldn't have done that without you. We couldn't have done, and that this was it's a principle again I see in the Bible, but then I also particularly it was highlighted to me more by John Maxwell. I was reading one of his books, and he was mentioning just how and I was like, actually, that is so good, and I practiced it out in front of the rest of the team or in front of the directors. I'll point out people in the team and tell the director, without this person, we couldn't have achieved this. We couldn't have achieved that. And you see the smiles on their faces. Like next day, they're like, what project is there to do? Everyone's now energized, wanting to do more because they know you're someone who would point the light back at them. So I think having a team, especially in this season that we're in, and as we move forward, from outside of a professional point of view, just even relationally, you need a team. We need people who would do life with us and work this journey with us and be able to encourage us and we encourage them. So yes, the past 12 months has definitely taught me the value also of team.
It's amazing, isn't it? Because if you look, you will find. And if you look and you look for those opportunities, those good people, those good moments, you find them. And back in my time at the police, I reflect on a moment where I was head of department. One of my team leaders came to me and said, I'm so glad I've got this person on my team. They're amazing. I wouldn't be without them. So as soon as the phone hung up, I messaged that teammate specifically. I said, your line manager really values having you as part of your team. Thank you for everything that you're doing. And they're like, who is this guy? But it's so simple. It's so simple. And I just encourage as many people out there. It doesn't mean to say you got to walk around with pom-poms, does it? It's just, if you don't learn to appreciate these things, they disappear.
Absolutely. Totally agree with you. And I think sometimes, again, and I can speak from my own experience, and maybe this will resonate with someone, is initially I was afraid to shine the light on others because I thought doing that would take the emphasis away from me. It would perhaps signify to my leaders that I wasn't needed, and these were the guys and girls who were doing the work. So why is Iroro here? And so it was me now changing that mindset and understanding that the more I did that, it was actually a reflection on the fact that I was leading well. And I remember leaving my last employment. I mean, I'm a emotional person anyway. So I'm not afraid to admit that. But
Amen.
I remember crying on the last day because my directors came in, and in the lab, my colleagues were saying things, and in that moment, you hear things and you're thinking, are they referring to me, or are they talking about someone else? And they were saying all of these things, and then one of my directors said to me, Iro, don't underestimate what you're hearing, because in my decades in healthcare, I've never heard lab staff talk about an individual the way they're recognizing and talking about you, or having an appreciation for quality, because my specific role is in quality and governance. I haven't heard staff talk about, and I'm talking on all levels of staff, speaking on quality and appreciation of quality and governance, the way they are talking about it. So you have, in effect, changed culture. But then I started crying because I thought, my God, I didn't realize I was having that impact. But then looking back and just reflecting, like, what did I do right then? What can I take onto my new role? I realized definitely one of the biggest things for me was always going to people and appreciating them and saying, well done for what you did. Thank you for doing this, and thank you for doing that. Thank you for doing all of that. And also, if not just on a one-to-one, but then also when there is a crowd. It's one thing doing, things personally, and that's great, but then also doing it in a meeting where the directors, where their managers are there. That I think really helped me in value people more, and also help them realize that, look, I do value you. And it was a learning curve for me, knowing that just because I I lend my shoulder for someone to climb doesn't mean that I'm not climbing also. So that was a big thing
Mm.
for for me to learn, definitely.
Love that. My ethos is about helping people be always better than yesterday. What does that phrase mean to you?
That means encouraging people to do the best today, to 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 learn as much as they can today, to apply what they've learned today. It's always better than yesterday. It means I recognize that there is a gap in my learning or in my knowledge from yesterday. I recognize that I'm not the finished product yesterday. I recognize that I've achieved something yesterday, but there is more to come. I'm not, as long as I'm breathing, there is more to give. There's more to learn. There's more to experience. And that's a humble position to take. So for me, that phrase really, it's about humility. If I wouldn't humble myself and say, well, look, I can learn from yesterday, then I think I'm the best thing since sliced bread. And I don't feel the need to learn. I don't feel the need to reach out. I don't feel the need to listen to your podcast. I don't feel the need to hear what others are saying. I think, well, I know it all. And when we stop learning, I think then we start to die. We start to diminish, and not necessarily physical death, but it's just you. There's no more growth. So for me, that's what that means. It's a position of humility. That's what that phrase means to me.
I love that. Thank you for that reflection, and thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing your heart and mind and your stories. I'm sure there's far more that we haven't covered, but I just love it if you could leave us a final thought from your good self.
And first of all, thank you for your time and for having me. Thank you for this conversation. I've been blessed by it, and just for all that you're doing. It takes a lot to do this. The consistency, the intentionality. So thank you for your service to us and to all the other leaders out there who are in your community. I think I was reflecting at the start of this year the lessons I learned from 2020. And what I definitely want to carry into 2021. And the big things that really came on my list were all relational. So first thing was really appreciating and having good relationships, quality relationships, whether at work with my teams, at home, and with my my network and group. So if I could leave anything with people who are listening, is build relationships. I think it's really important. It's good for you and for your progress, for your development. It's also good for the others as well, because you get to pour into them as they pour into you. And I mean the sort of relationships where you can be completely real. Now you can't have that with 100 people, but maybe it's the 2 or the 3 where you can be very vulnerable and they could tell you, when you've done something wrong, and you could do the same as well, because that's how we grow. Don't be scared of criticism in love. When someone tells you something out of love, because they want you to grow. That's how I see it, or that's how I choose to see it. Now, when someone pulls me aside and say, "Well, you've messed up here," they must really love me to have the boldness and confidence to tell me that. So build good quality relationships. I think it's useful, and we're relational beings. We weren't made to be alone. And again, it's not about marriage or relationship as a man and a woman. I'm talking about just a community of people that you can do life with. Life is better on the journey with people.
I love that, my friend. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.